Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and we are on TikTok. Folks, this is the show where we're British, we love the United Kingdom, and we want to stay together. And if that's you, please keep watching because we've got a great show for you lined up. And if that's not you, please do keep watching anyway because you might learn something and you're going to enjoy the entertainment anyway. So please do keep watching. Send in your greetings. Please tell us where you're watching from. Send in your comments and send in your questions. And we'll do our best to read them out and to answer your questions as well. Folks, we are teleprompter free on this rather chilly April evening, and we're broadcasting until 8 p.m. and we have got a big announcement for you about some fantastic activism that we are going to be delivering, not this Saturday, but the Saturday thereafter, on Saturday the 20th. Keep watching for that announcement shortly. Hello to the folks who are joining us on TikTok. Friend Maiden says, hey Alistair, hey to you as well, Friend Maiden. Hope you are doing well tonight. Who was first in on our chat here? It was the one and only Debbie. Good evening to you and to everyone that's watching. William is watching from Glasgow, which has got a well-publicised rat problem according to yesterday's newspapers, which is very unfortunate, but it does not surprise me because the state of some of the streets in Glasgow these days is pretty poor. It's pretty poor. You do wonder what one is paying one's council tax for. I have to say, I took a little trip up Royston Road the other day on Saturday. I was just walking around and my goodness me, the number of blocked drains where the water was causing pavements to be flooded, not just roads. The entire underpass next to the police station headquarters is literally impassable. The underpass that goes under the motorway is impassable because it's flooded and it's clearly not been cleared of leaves this year, not even this last autumn. It's just been left to rot, that whole underpass complex. So I, being the public-spirited citizen that I am, I did attempt to contact Glasgow City Council today, and eventually I had to resort to their help desk on Twitter, and I sent them the photographs. And I do hope they can get somebody to sort that out. But there is a definite need for the streets and the litter to be picked up in Glasgow. And they need to employ more people to do that. And if they don't have the money, the British government should give them the money because that's why we're in a union. Anyway, a little bit of a diversion there prompted by William's thoughts on the state of the city. Harold the Younger says, I wish someone could actually explain why the UK is a good idea, giving away our power to a foreign government. Harold, I'm going to stop you right there. The British government is not a foreign government. The British government is the government of the British, which includes yourself, sir. Giving them the right to plunder, well, strong word, our land and resources, to abuse our people. Harold, please, come on. We keep watching is all we can say, Harold, and you may be pleasantly surprised at what you find out about the nation that you live in and the nation of which you are no doubt a citizen, and long may that continue. Derek says, Good evening, Alistair and the AFFG family. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. Derek, I just want to thank you for your fantastic activism at the weekend, where you and I had a street stall in Glasgow, and we really hit home with our Get Humza Out banner, which was just fantastic. And everybody loved it, and everybody was laughing at it and taking pictures of it as well on their mobile phone. And you know, the Get Humza Out, we'll be talking about that in a moment. There you go. That was the banner right there. That's a good one, isn't it? Fantastic. Fantastic. That was a busy day, that one. That was a busy day. Okay. Bat Preston journalist says, hi all, I hope you're all enjoying the collapse of the anti-free speech bill as much as me. Keep reporting everything you see. We're going to be talking about that extensively tonight. We absolutely are. Scottish man says, what does the banner say? It says, Get Humza Out. And it's got a picture of Humza with a cap on that makes him look like something from 1984. Hi to James and to Stephen and to Catherine, who has sent us a fantastic picture of our British and Proud mug collection, which we'll be talking about in a moment. We Say It podcast says, big up Alistair. If you are on Twitter, folks, please give the We Say It podcast a follow. Doing excellent work at We Say It podcast on Twitter and also on rumble.com. Thorpe Sewing Lessons says, good evening everyone from Yorkshire. Love the picture of our flags. There's a celebration for St George on the 23rd of April in London. Hey to Scotland, Scorpion. Stephen says, YouTube is not playing. Don't tell me that it's gone down on YouTube. Is it playing on Twitter? It is playing on Twitter, I'm glad to say, but it looks like the YouTube stream has gone down. Now, why would that be? Let me see if I can connect it. We're clicking a button here, but it doesn't seem to be working. It's working on Facebook and on Twitter, but it's not playing on YouTube. Sorry about that. Don't know what's happened. We're going to need to look into that for future. Hey to Stealth and to Ruggiero. Good evening, everyone. What's Derek saying? I don't know. Derek, well, Derek's watching it on YouTube. Derek, tell me what platform are you watching it on? It's telling me that you're watching it on YouTube. Yeah, I got you, Debbie. We're looking into it. Don't know what you mean by that, Derek. Okay, well, let's talk straight away. Let me think. If we're not on YouTube, what are we gonna have to do? We're gonna have to. Yeah. Okay, Debbie. I'm gonna have to say you're gonna have to watch it on Twitter if you can, possibly, or on Facebook. That's a pity. Let me just contact my. Yeah, we're working on Facebook and we're working on Twitter. Sorry about the YouTube situation. Now, okay, so here's our big announcement, okay, for all of you guys watching on Twitter and also on Facebook. The official marching wing of the Scottish National Party and Greens is a group called Believe in Scotland, and they had they're the official marching wing. They separate themselves from the all under one banner people who the SNP and Greens considered to be a little bit too far out there, a little bit too fringe. So the SNP has never really wanted to officially march with all under one banner. So last year it set up its own marching wing and it called it Believe in Scotland. And they had a march last September or October where they claimed they had 25,000 on it, but we counted them and it was just somewhat under 4,000. And so they're having another march, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, which is the 20th. And they're marching from Kelvin Grove to George Square. And they're going to have a rally, a 2-hour rally in George Square, which will probably be starting about 2 o'clock. And guess who's going to be speaking at it? Humza Yousaf, the First Minister of Scotland, is going to be speaking in George Square. Now, folks, that's an opportunity which is too good to miss, okay? Back in 2019, the last First Minister to speak in George Square was Nicola Sturgeon. And we were there at the time. And a lot of us, well over 100 of us, about 150 of us, had a big counter rally at the other side of the square. The police kind of cordoned us off. And they might do the same again. I don't know what they're going to do. But we're going to be there again. And so I'm calling on everybody to get to George Square on Saturday the 20th of April. We'll be starting at 1:15 and we're calling it Free Speech Rules. Get Humza out. Saturday the 20th of April, George Square, Glasgow. Humza's speaking at the SNP Green Rally. Join us. Join our counter rally at 1:15 p.m. It's your chance to stand up for free speech. Okay. It's your chance to stand up for free speech. Please bring along your Union Jacks, your Union Jack umbrellas, and please do stand with us. And let's make a noise and let's tell Humza Yousaf that we do not want his Anti-Free Speech Act. It's not needed, it's not wanted, and it needs to be repealed. That's going to be our message, and we're going to be taking that message far and wide. We need it. We need people with mobile phones there to post our speeches on the internet. We bring along banners and flags, and let's make sure Humza gets the message that his anti-free speech law is not wanted and it should be repealed. We're keeping up the pressure on this. There was a really good protest organised on the 1st of April. This is our protest in Glasgow, 20th of April. And if it is as good as the one we did against Sturgeon, then my goodness, it's going to be fantastic. And let's cast our mind back, let's revisit that protest. We called it Get Sturgeon Telt, and it was on the 2nd of November 2019. Let's look at, there you go, there's a picture of us. There's a banner with some Irish Gaelic on it, which means clear the way. That's the motto of the Royal Irish Regiment. And okay, there's a shot from behind looking towards looking towards Sturgeon. Okay, that's an excellent picture. That's an excellent picture of our flags being proudly waved by people who were wanting to get Sturgeon Telt. Okay. There's another angle. That's me in the middle with the megaphone. Okay. And there's one of our supporters with his handmade poster, SNP liars, Scotland's shame. And there's an even better picture from Getty Images of our man very happily saying such. And this was the Scottish Daily Express website. Nicola Sturgeon humiliated as Union Jack waving unionists protest independence rally. And on the side there, you'll see the column says most read in politics. And guess what's at number one? The story of A Force for Good. Nicola Sturgeon humiliated as Union Jack waving unionists protest independence rally. Okay. Now, that was... What happened was Michael Russell protested that article. Okay, Michael Russell was, at the time, was he the deputy leader of the SNP, or he's a big cheese in the SNP? He protested that article to the Daily Express, and they took it down. You can only find it now on the Wayback Machine. But he lied, and he said that those pictures that I've just shown you were photoshopped. He put out a tweet saying they were photoshopped. What absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Lying nonsense. And so, after about 18 hours of us trending at number one on the Scottish Daily Express website, they redacted the article, which was really irritating. But anyway, it's still to be found on the Wayback Machine, along with all the pictures that they used of us as well. So we're going to do that again. We're going to make sure that our voice is heard. And so, folks, please add this to your diary. It's Saturday, the 20th of April, George Square, Glasgow. We will be assembling from 1:15. We're expecting their march to start filing into the square at about 1:30, and we're expecting their speeches to begin about 2 o'clock and lasting for about another 2 hours. So it's going to be most of the afternoon on Saturday. So please do spread this around, spread that information around, spread our graphic that we're using to advertise this around, and make sure this graphic here, if you see it, share it on Facebook, share it on X, formerly known as Twitter. Send it out to your email friends. Let's all get down there and make a noise so that Humza knows he's not welcome in the great British city of Glasgow. Okay. We Say It podcast says, time to rally together, Scotland. Let your voices be heard. Don't be scared. Second that emotion. Stephen says, will Humza speak or have a rant like Nicola? Yes, remember the rant that Nicola had. It's her famous rant where she wanted Scotland to be tolerant, and then she slipped up and she goes something about being intolerant to Tories. Well, she was just in a very bad mood that day, and that's why she wasn't composing herself properly. And the reason she was in such a bad mood was because of the noise that we were making. And that's what was like driving her around the bend. And so she's just getting more and more agitated. And so she ends up making that classic speech of hers, which has become a meme now and has gone worldwide. Somebody says there, what's your thoughts on Westminster's cost of renovation? Haven't given much thought to it, but what we always say is that we should move the Parliament around, the British Parliament. Let's have it. Let's have 5 years in Scotland, 5 years in Northern Ireland, 5 years in Wales, and 5 years in England. I'm sure we can do that as technology progresses. English man Dan says, stay strong, Scotland. Whether you're pro-independence or unionism, I don't care. I'd just be proud to see our brothers north of the border standing free and strong. Alfie says, invite David Clues of UNN to come along and cover it live on the 20th. He could bring it to the attention of all Unity News networkers. Well, we'll make sure that David knows about it anyway, and he's certainly welcome to come along and film it if he wants. Stephen says, we will not be silenced. The Union is strong and can withstand the nationalists. Now, let's talk here briefly about why we are against the bill. And I want to make reference the bill, the Act, the so-called Hate Speech Act, which we're calling the Anti-Free Speech Act. Now, I'm going to make reference also to some letters that have been published in the Scottish press recently, which are extremely good. And basically, we oppose the law on principle and also because it doesn't work in practice. Okay, some people will just maybe oppose the law in practice because, hey, it's a waste of police time, which it certainly is. But we oppose it on those reasons as well, but especially we oppose it on principle. And what are the principles at stake here? Well, the first principle, of course, is that it offends the right to freedom of speech. Okay, freedom of speech is one of what you could say, what we like to think of anyway, as a genuine British value. A genuine British characteristic, perhaps, would be more accurate. And it's a genuine British characteristic that people have fought and died for, or at least they thought they were fighting and dying for something like freedom of speech. So if you are going to impinge upon freedom of speech, if you're going to in any way kind of limit it, then, or restrict it, and especially if you're going to punish it, then you'd better set the highest possible bar in your law. You'd better give freedom of speech the most leeway, the most room to maneuver, the most scope before you even think of restricting it, before you even think of punishing it. You have to, your law has to be freedom of speech first. And it has to set the widest possible bounds for that freedom of speech before you even think about restricting it, much less punishing it. And this law doesn't do that. It's not clear at all where those boundaries are. Are you very easily limited, or do you have a wide remit to say what you think? It's not clear. It's deliberately ambiguous. And we see that in the phrasing of it, and indeed in the very concept of hate, which is itself a subjective term. That is to say, it's not clear what that actually is. Everybody's got their own idea of what is hateful. And you see that in people complaining since the law was passed about things that they believe are hateful, which other people wouldn't necessarily think were hateful, which things that other people would just think was legitimate political speech. So it's very much in the eye of the beholder, which is not conducive to good law. Good law has to be very clear, and it has to be very objective. And you as an individual have to know when you've broken it. It must be very, very obvious to you when you've broken it. Otherwise, it's not a good law. If you throw a brick through a jewellery window, a jewellery shop window, you know you've broken the law. It's an objective thing. You don't do that. But if you're going to start setting up laws about words which can be perceived to be hateful by other people, and when other people have the say-so over you, when you have to, when the burden is on you to say that it's not hateful, then that's not good law. That's bad law. And so it offends against the principle of freedom of speech. It offends against the principle of good law. And what it also does as well, in principle, is that it promotes government overreach. It promotes government control over society and over the individual's mouth and ultimately their minds. And that's a worrying thing. We don't want that. So you've got the principle of freedom of speech that our ancestors fought and died for. You've got the principle that law must be clear and objective. And you've got the principle of that we should not have government overreach over society, that the individual and society's right should be protected, and that the government shouldn't be trying to intervene and control your mind and your mouth. So these are all principles here at stake on these kind of matters. And of course, there's the practical objections as well, which are as a consequence of the fact that it is bad law. It's subjective, and so it's going to lead to lots of frivolous, silly complaints, and it's going to lead to lots of vexatious complaints by people who are using the law in a malicious way in order to attack or harm or hurt people that they don't like. And that frivolous nature of the law, that malicious element, that's going to waste police time, it's going to waste police resources, it's going to waste taxpayers' money. All of these are practical objections which should also be considered in this law. And so we're against it on these principles and also in practice. And these are the sorts of things that we'll be explaining at our Free Speech Rules rally, which in itself will be an exercise of freedom of speech. By simply going along to this rally, by simply standing up for freedom of speech, we're exercising our freedom of speech. We are elevating freedom of speech as a good thing against those on the platform from the SNP and Greens who would destroy freedom of speech, who would use speech as a way of controlling our mouths and our minds for their own political objects. So, what else needs to be said on that matter? Well, what is to be done, essentially? The first thing that we are doing by our actions, and that everybody else is doing by their actions also, is basically campaigning for this law to be repealed. It's a bad law. It should be taken off the books and forgotten about. On the basis of these principles, that it offends freedom of speech, that it's not clear, and that it promotes government overreach. If that is not happening in the short term, what we can also argue for is something called jury nullification. Now, we live under the rule of law, which basically means that judgments are made in accord with what's written down or what has been commonly accepted behaviour, rather than laws being made in an arbitrary manner day to day. And so we live under that rule of law. But the rule of law is only meaningful, and Parliament's laws can only continue if, when it goes to court, if the court plays along with that law. If the court doesn't play along with it, for example, if the judge throws it out, or if the jury refuses to convict, then that law becomes unworkable. And that's called jury nullification. And so in that way, a jury can be the final arbiter of the rule of law. The jury can be the final arbiter of good law. A jury can decide that's bad law, we're not going to convict that person under it. And they can refuse to convict. And so a jury system can help to ensure better legislation by refusing to convict under bad laws. And we may be seeing examples of jury nullification, where something appears to be cut and dry, but the jury's saying, no, we're not going to convict because we think the law, the premise of the law, is a bad one. So there's always jury nullification as well. And we may actually find that. We may actually find that juries, either they find the case too confusing, or they just simply choose not to convict, and the state is unable to prosecute in all the cases that it would like to prosecute. So that's also an option, jury nullification. Another option is to campaign for basically a Freedom of Speech Act. That's something that one could do as well. Rather than continuing to campaign obviously against this particular anti-free speech law, but actually campaign in a much more positive way for freedom of speech, for a speech act like the American First Amendment, which says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. We could have a law like that. In a way, we do have those sorts of laws, at least as I've pointed out before. We have got the Article 10 freedom of expression written into British law, which says everyone has the right to freedom of expression, which shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive information and ideas without interference by public authority, and regardless of frontiers. So we do have that anyway. So maybe what we need to be doing is just emphasizing that sort of thing. In fact, if somebody wanted to do a banner, that would be a good one to bring along. Article 10, freedom of expression. The first sentence there of part 1 needs to be put into a banner and held up at our rally. Folks, that's maybe something that somebody would like to do. So, and as well as that, we could be campaigning as well, and we do campaign for stronger defences, stronger free speech defences to be written specifically into this law as well. That's if we can't get it repealed. But the way it's going, it might even be repealed, because this article appeared in yesterday's National. 2/3 want hate crime scrapped, poll finds. A majority of people in Scotland want controversial new hate crime laws scrapped, polling has found. A representative sample of 1,085 adults were interviewed by polling firm Find Out Now from April the 3rd to April the 5th. The survey found that 68.6% of people thought the Scottish Government should bin the Hate Crime and Public Order Scotland Act, with 31.4% in favour of keeping it, excluding those undecided. And would you believe, do you know who ran this poll? The Alba Party. So there you go. That's at least one good policy that the Alba Party has, which is to scrap this poll. Isn't that interesting? The Alba Party, a breakaway from the SNP. And it says here, Alba have now launched a petition to have the Hate Crime Act scrapped. So, goodness me, isn't it a state of affairs when here in our United Kingdom the apart from the Conservatives, the only political party arguing to scrap the Hate Crime Act is Alex Salmond's ALBA. Is that enough for us to become Scottish nationalists, or rather Scottish separatists? Not yet, that's for sure. And perhaps, I always like to say Scottish separatist because I actually do consider myself to be a Scottish nationalist, but not one that wants to break up the United Kingdom. I do believe in Scotland, the nation. I do believe that Scotland is a great nation, and I do believe it's part of an even greater nation, which we call the United Kingdom, which is all parts of the United Kingdom working together, because we are greater than the sum of our parts, as we always like to say. And as we always like to say in our one big country, where we elaborate upon what I've just said, where we elaborate upon the fact that we are greater than the sum of our parts. In fact, you can search Amazon for one big country, or you can get the link there from our shop, and we do have a chapter, One Big Country Fundamentals, where we list 12 British Unionist fundamentals. There you go. How's that for a screenshot? You can get that by searching Amazon for One Big Country. And we've also got it as an ebook as well. And you can get that as an ebook as well from the same address. Good, let's see what you folks are saying here. We will answer your questions on TikTok, but try to keep them pertaining to the subject matter. James, talking about the Hate Speech, Anti-Free Speech Act, says too many grey areas here. It's a waste of police time too. They have better things to be doing. I think this is the SNP trying to silence us and protect themselves. Sko on TikTok says, do you still believe the Act of Union is over 4,000 years old? I believe that the Union, if we separate that concept from the Parliamentary Act of 1707, I do believe and know, in fact, that the Union is over 5,000 years old, because it's the Union that we have is the social and cultural unions here in our British Isles, and that's been forming since the earliest recorded history that we can find here in the British Isles, which is about 3000 BC, and that's up there in Orkney, and we cover that in One Big Country, sir. Good point here from Englishman Dan. The world seems to have forgotten the principle of honouring our forefathers. I believe freedom depends on the appreciation of those that fought for it and honouring their efforts. James says we could present a copy of the One Big Country book to Humza on the 20th. That's a thought, if we can get close to the stage, but that's possibly unlikely. We Say It podcast says that's what they want, full control, and We Say It podcast is going to be speaking on that soon. British Legends notes that Humza himself is claiming that anyone who describes his 2020 speech as a hate crime is part of the far right. Well, you know, we've been following this for a long time. Back in 2020, when he first came up with this idea, and remember, he came up with the idea in 2020 and the law was passed in 2021, and it hasn't been brought into effect until this month. But back in 2020, there was a person wrote an article on Twitter, and it got a lot of comments. And Humza waded in with his comment as well, saying that the thread on Twitter proves why we need his bill. In other words, he was suggesting that the people on this thread would be convicted when his bill came in. And there it is there. 4th of May 2020. This is while it's just still going through the Parliament. Oh, says Humza. One look at the comments below this ludicrous article shows why we need laws to protect against religious hatred. Islamophobia on the comments just proves the point of the need for this bill. That's interesting. Just proves the point of the need for this bill. Okay. Well, we looked for that thread today on TikTok, and lo and behold, it's still up there, and we retweeted it. And so you'll find the comments that he's referring to on our Twitter page. I think it's the last thing that we tweeted out this afternoon. Some newspapers might be interested in revisiting that thread, because apparently those are the people that Humza actually wants to get convicted, and those are the kind of comments that he thinks are worthy of being taken to court. That's actually a very important point that I've just made there. We Say It podcast saying, I think your viewers and fans would benefit from the knowledge of you and I speaking again. Happy to do so. We Say It podcast, happy to do so. Enjoyed it the last time. Okay, now, keeping on this theme of people saying things that the system doesn't like, we were interested to see this story this week. Labour councillor in, quote, rising race attacks on whites, close quote, row. And this appeared in the Scottish Daily Express on the 5th of April, where it says, a Scottish Labour councillor has warned of, quote, rising racist attacks on white children and teachers in Glasgow's schools. The comments have been disowned by her party and sparked a row with the SNP and anti-racism campaigners. Audrey Dempsey, who represents Springburn and Rob Royston, tabled a question for a meeting of the Labour group on Glasgow City Council. It read, quote, to ask the relevant convener if they are aware of the rising racist attacks on white children and teachers in our schools, and how do they plan to tackle this? Close quote. After the question was leaked to the Herald, Labour moved to distance itself from Ms Dempsey's remarks, saying they were, quote, not reflective of the view of the Scottish Labour Party. The SNP said it was, quote, utterly abhorrent. Blah, 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 blah. However, Councillor Dempsey stood by her question. She said she found it, quote, baffling the SNP would turn this into a political attack when they have never once approached me to find the basis of the question, close quote. She said it was about a particular situation, and she was, quote, very aware of incidents where racist abuse against white children and teachers is happening. Councillor Dempsey, whose ward in the north-east of the city contains some of Scotland's most deprived areas, added, quote, if someone hinted to myself that children were suffering abuse, I would do all I could to find out the details and resolve it for the children, not play political football with it. She continued, quote, The victims I am aware of feel the action taken at the time of the incident was not appropriate for the act that was carried out on them, and they seek answers from the Education Department at Glasgow Council as to what will change to make their complaints be taken as seriously as others. Quote, Unfortunately, the question, so it would have been nice for the SNP to show some care and compassion for the children in question and simply ask what it was about. We should not be supporting one vulnerable group by making another group vulnerable. We have to treat everyone equally with the same rules and consequences. Well, good for her for raising that up. And can you imagine what happened to him? Labour suspend councillor as inquiry launched. Scottish Labour have suspended a councillor embroiled in a racism row as an inquiry was launched. Glasgow councillor Audrey Dempsey is at the centre of a storm over offensive social media posts and her focus on, quote, anti-white racism, close quote, which she claims is on the rise. A Scottish Labour spokesperson said, quote, the Labour Party takes all complaints seriously. They are fully investigated in line with our rules and procedures, and any appropriate action is taken. Well, let's hope they don't take action against Councillor Dempsey, but they take action to address the important issue which she highlighted. And well done to her for highlighting that. But really, the Labour Party is awfully politically correct. This is a funny report which appeared in the National on the 6th of April. Labour students quit after liking far-right tweets aimed at First Minister. Representatives on a Scottish Labour Student Society board have resigned after they were called out on social media for liking tweets from far-right political party Britain First. Aberdeen University Labour students told followers that, quote, both members have resigned from the executive and quit the society. They had liked one or two tweets that were having a go at Humza Yousaf, apparently, especially his various things that were happening in Butte House, if you remember what he was doing around Easter time there. But the Scottish Labour Students group really is a bunch of kind of, what's the word? They're awfully politically correct, if there's a word for that. And it says, they released a statement which said, it's important members can respond, apologise and be held accountable. Again, to everyone, sorry. Our constitution and socialist values explicitly, quote, oppose bigotry directed against class, race, religion or any other division. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, that's Scottish Labour for you. And they've been very silent, actually, on the Hate Speech Act, even though they almost to a man voted for it, apart from one or two, or literally 3 or 4 honourable exceptions. Too many people, says We Say It podcast, have seen Humza's white speech and they're seeing no accountability or prosecution from it. It is almost like that it's as if the law is not being applied in a fair manner. It's being applied in a selective manner. And in fact, there was a letter in the Glasgow Herald yesterday from somebody here who says, surely the most important thing about any law must be that people know when they have broken it, and any law that does not pass this test will meet with one of two fates. One is that it will be applied selectively, which is what it seems to many people to be happening, as is the case in the legal system that Russia inherited from the Soviet Union, whereby there are laws against virtually everything, but you will only get nicked if the state has got it in for you. And the other option is that it will not be applied at all because it's just too complicated and contradictory to do so. That may be what's happening. That may be what happens. It just falls under the weight of its own contradictions. So, keep sending in the comments there on TikTok, folks. Let me see if there's anything I can read out. Somebody asked, what's my thoughts on the Scottish Labour Party being registered in London? Well, I don't think that makes a whole lot of difference where it's registered. It's a British national party. They do have a Scottish part of it as well. That's for them. That's their internal issues they can work out. They don't need me to really weigh in on that. Blah blah blah. Who else can say something? What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on Westminster policy? I don't understand that one. Scott Be Kind says, Scotland's bankrupt. We need business, oil, gas, even coal. We need to buy back. We certainly do need oil, gas and coal. That's for certain. And the latest that I saw yesterday was that the SNP Greens have banned new builds. They've banned wood-burning stoves. Okay, if you've got one already, you can still use it, but you can't anymore buy one and fit one to a house. That is just appalling. I mean, wood-burning stoves are intended to keep people warm, and they're extremely effective at that. If you've got a house and you've got a wood-burning stove in your living room, that will heat up several rooms at once. They're absolutely excellent, and they're using a renewable resource as fuel, and many people in country areas, they don't need to even cut down any trees. They can just gather wood as old school kind of thing. So it's an extremely green form of energy. But no, the Greens don't like the idea that people might be warm in Scotland. You have to make sure that everybody's freezing cold in Scotland. So we really do have to look at the SNP and Greens as absolute, utter oddball fanatics who want the country to be cold, who want you to shiver during autumn and winter and most of spring. Goodness me, it's just beyond belief. But the good news is that they're on their way out. And in fact, I was reading this article here. It's an interview with Jim Sillars. SNP has lost credibility as the leader of our national movement, by which he means the Scottish separatist movement. And it says here, Sillars laments the influence that the Scottish Greens have come to exert on the SNP and believes they've exacerbated the amateurism that's come to settle across the Scottish government like a blight. Sillars says, quote, the Greens have done enormous damage to the SNP. Well, I would add they've also done enormous damage to Scotland, and they're doing enormous damage every day. He goes on, quote, I think Patrick Harvey lives in a make-believe world of his own invention, while Lorna Slater is wired to the moon. And yet these two and the party they represent are driving government policy. Nicola Sturgeon was short of one for a majority, Yet if she'd asked people with a degree of experience, she'd have been told not to worry. This is back in 2021 when they were elected. You have 4 opposition parties. The only thing you need to worry about is getting your budget through, because after that you have huge executive power. It's a matter of bargaining with all 4 parties. You'll get at least one of them to ensure the budget goes through. Certainly there will be the odd bill where you might have to do a deal with Labour or even with the Greens, but this is marginal stuff. You don't need to put yourself in someone else's back pocket as the SNP have done with the Greens. You don't need to put yourself in someone else's back pocket as the SNP have done with the Greens. Wise words. Wise words. And so much that Scotland's suffering under now is as a consequence of the Scottish Cabbage Party, the soggy Greens, and their extremely strange ideas on everything from social to cultural matters, not to say heating and electricity matters as well. No, the Scottish Greens really are a blight. They're like Dutch elm disease on Scotland. You know, it's literally one of these vegetative diseases. That's what they're doing to the Scottish body politic. They're killing it like blight on potatoes. Enough of the vegetative metaphors. Englishman Dan, when I ask Scots if they've ever been to an event to celebrate Scottish heritage, identity, they always tell me no, which makes me think it's no wonder I rarely see pushback against these anti-Scottish, anti-British figures. Interesting thought. We Say It podcast says, I shall sort some props for the 20th if you wish, Alistair. Please do, sir. Please do. James says, back to the Stone Age, it seems, with this government. I love my log burner. Wood burning stoves are the bomb. They really are. Very cosy. Yes. We Say It asks, what's your thoughts on Murdo Fraser being treated differently over the Hate Crime Act? What that refers to is the idea of the non-crime hate incident, and that's where the police say that's where the police log a complaint and it doesn't meet the threshold for a crime to be committed because they don't or can't see any intention or likelihood of hatred being stirred up, whatever any of that means. But they can't find that, but they have to acknowledge that somebody's complained about it, so it gets written down as a non-crime hate incident. And apparently Murdo Fraser made a tweet a little while ago, and somebody complained about his tweet, and Murdo Fraser's name got logged down as having participated in this non-crime hate incident, and Murdo Fraser only found out about it after a Freedom of Information request. And that contrasts with the fact that thousands now have complained about Humza Yousaf and his insulting words, which could arguably be said to be likely to arguably stir up hatred. But no non-crime hate incident has been recorded. So Murdo Fraser's been asking, well, why was my name recorded because one person complained about something that wasn't a crime? Why hasn't Humza Yousaf, why hasn't his name been written down and recorded against a non-crime hate incident? So again, that suggests selective application of the law, and this hate crime act is very open to selective interpretation. That's one of its biggest weaknesses, is selective interpretation. Alfie likes that Scottish Cabbage Party. Well, it was one of our team here at A Force for Good who came up with that fantastic moniker. Yeah, absolutely. So, folks, remember, we have got Saturday, the 20th of April. Join us for our Free Speech Rules rally. Get Humza out. We'll be in George Square in Glasgow. We'll be counter-rallying at 1:15 p.m. while the SNP and Greens have their rally in the square at the same time. And Humza Yousaf is going to be speaking at it. So now is your chance to stand up for free speech and tell Humza what you think. And we'll be shouting through the megaphone, and we'll be holding up our posters and our flags and our Get Humza Out banner. And we'll be telling him that his anti-free speech law is not needed, it's not wanting, and it must be repealed, because free speech rules. Okay. Now, I just want to mention some great products that we've got. A person sent us this great picture. We've got a whole new range of mugs in a whole new range of different colours. Let's put up a photograph. These are our British and Proud mugs. Now, we have Scottish and British mugs. We have got British Ulster mugs. We've got Ulster Scots mugs. We have got Royal Scots. We've got British Together. Basically, what you want to do, folks, is go to our Teespring store. Now, the thing with Teespring is, for some reason, you're not able to search their site. So the only way you can get to our shop is to either type in that exact link, which is A Force for Good with hyphens between each word, .creator-spring.com, or simply go to Google and search Teespring, which is T-E-E Spring, Teespring, and A Force for Good, and the first thing that come up will be our shop. And we've got mugs, we've got t-shirts, we have got hoodies, we've got long sleeve t-shirts, we've got 16 different items in every product range, and we've got about 8 or 9 product ranges. And there's just some of our mugs. We've even got mugs with our classic AFFG paintings emblazoned across them. So that's at our Teespring store, which you can find by putting in Teespring and A Force for Good into Google, and you'll get taken to that shop. Lots of good items on there, and you might be able to get stuff in time for the 20th, but possibly not. But nevertheless, it takes about 14 days, sometimes 21 days for items to arrive. Okay. Let's see any comments that we can read out here. Some of these questions we wouldn't necessarily answer on TikTok. They're not really opposite to what we've been speaking about. Somebody worried about how both Labour and the SNP are a disaster. Well, we have to have hope, and things are going to change quickly. You can see that things are changing like the old way is changing. Like intellectually, there's lots of things changing on in the world at the moment, and in 5 years we could be living in a completely new kind of consciousness, actually, and things that we've been believing and knowing for years will be simply accepted. We can see that certainly happening on Twitter and TikTok. Maybe not yet in the wider fields of the national newspapers, but nevertheless things are moving, and when things move and different options become available, then things can get better. So do not be downhearted, let not your heart be troubled, because things will get better. Good. Well, folks, it is the top of the hour. In fact, it's 6 minutes past the hour. And we've had a good number of people. We've had an average of 350 people watching tonight, which is really, really good. And that's with our YouTube stream going down as well. So it would have been higher if our YouTube stream had worked. We're going to have to look into why that was. But we'll download this and we'll get it uploaded onto YouTube anyway. So, folks, we will be back. We'll be back next week. And that will be just 3 days before our big event on the 20th. Now, if you can't be there, here's some way you can help us. We're going to need a little bit of cash for that. Not a whole lot of cash, but we are going to need some cash to lay that on, okay? So if you can donate to us, we do have a link. It's a forceforgood.uk/donate to. If you can't be with us on the 20th, if you can't stand at our Free Speech Rules rally, if you can't stand with us to tell Humza that we want him to repeal the Anti-Free Speech Act, if you can't do those things because you're busy that day, here's a way that you can help us and ensure that the rest of us can get there and can organise to put this on. Please do donate what you can afford at a forceforgood.uk/donate to. That will really, really help our work. Thank you. Thank you. Now, folks, it's the end of the show, so thanks for all your comments. We will see you next week. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.